The Mystery of the Substitute Teacher. Ava, Kim, and Patrick glided toward their classroom on the moving hallway. They stepped off near the door and saw someone they did not recognize inside. A man was smiling and saying hello to each student who came into the classroom. "Who's that?" asked Patrick. "I don't know," said Kim. Kim walked through the door first, and Ava and Patrick followed her. They sat down at their desks, and the man walked to the front of the class. "Good morning, boys and girls," he said. "My name is Mr. Rob. Miss Williams is sick today, so I will be your substitute teacher. First, I want to meet each one of you." Mr. Rob asked each student to give his or her name. When everyone was finished, Mr. Rob looked at each person and said that person's name. He had learned 21 student names in under 5 minutes. "Miss Williams left me a note that told me what book your class is reading. Please press the reading key on your desk, and when the book comes up on your screen, click on page 12, said Mr. Rob. Ava looked down at her screen as Mr. Rob began to read aloud. When she looked up, she was amazed. He was not reading from the book on his screen, but reciting it from memory. Ava followed along, and Mr. Rob did not miss a word. Ava stopped. Ava looked at Kim, who was staring at Mr. Rob with her mouth open. Patrick and the other students blinked in wonder. Patrick raised his hand and asked, "Do you have a photographic memory, Mr. Rob?" "Yes, I do, Patrick. I can remember everything I read after seeing it only once. It is like my brain takes a picture of the words I see," said Mr. Rob. Mr. Rob asked the class to press the science button on their desks. "Miss Williams said that you were learning about recycling, and you will have a quiz tomorrow," Mr. Rob said. "Please review the material and feel free to ask me any questions." Everyone had a question for Mr. Rob. Kim was astounded when Mr. Rob answered all of their questions without ever looking at his computer. Miss Williams sometimes had to check the answers to some of the harder questions. At lunch, Ava, Kim, and Patrick talked about Mr. Rob. Ava said, "I think Mr. Rob is great, but there's something unusual about him." "I think so too," said Patrick. "Did you notice that he doesn't blink his eyes?" Kim said, "Yes, I did. And I also wondered about the small blue square on his back. It doesn't seem like it is part of the shirt." "That's interesting," said Eva. "Did you see him eat or drink anything?" "Miss Williams usually drinks water during class." "There really is something strange about Mr. Rob," said Patrick. "Let's try to figure out what it is when we get back to class." When they returned to class, Mr. Rob said, "Okay, boys and girls, now it is time for math. I will put some problems on the class screen, and you will solve for the answer and enter it on your screen." When everyone was finished, Mr. Rob solved the problems and put the answers on the class screen in just 1 minute. No one could understand how he was able to finish the problem so quickly. Mr. Rob then asked the students to split into groups to solve some more math problems. Ava, Patrick, and Kim worked together and also tried to figure out what was different about Mr. Rob. "Do you think he's an alien from Mars?" asked Ava. "No way," answered Kim. "The colony on Mars reported years ago that there are no aliens on Mars." "Hey, what's that thing he's standing on?" asked Patrick. The girls turned to see Mr. Rob standing on a blue pad near Miss Williams' desk. The blue pad looked like the square on his back. It lit up, then turned dark when Mr. Rob stepped off of it. Ava went to get a tissue and took a look at the pad when she walked by. She saw the initials STR on it. She rushed back and told Kim and Patrick what she saw. Patrick said, "I know what STR means. It stands for Substitute Teacher Robots. I read in a magazine article about how some schools have started using robots instead of people for substitute teachers. The blue square he stands on charges his battery, and I bet the little blue square on his shirt is where the battery goes." Kim raised her hand and said, "Mr. Rob, we noticed the blue square on your back, and the one you stood on with the letters STR. We know that STR stands for Substitute Teacher Robots. Are you an STR?" The class gasped loudly. They looked at Mr. Rob as he slowly walked towards Kim, smiling. He clapped his hands and said, "Very good, students. You figured it out. I am an STR. Miss Williams told me not to tell you because she thought you were all smart enough to figure out the truth. She was right." After that, all the students asked Mr. Rob about STR and tried to find questions he could not answer. They all agreed that Mr. Rob was the best substitute teacher ever.